Right.
Okay. Hi, Vega. I'll be kicking off some of the questions today. Thanks for joining us for SuperBio Scientist Spotlight. Could you start off by telling the SuperBio community about yourself?
Yeah. Um, my name is Vega. I currently work as a product marketing lead at NVIDIA for healthcare and life sciences. And my background getting to that role is very interesting. I started out wanting to be a professor, at one point. I did my undergrad at Berkeley in biology, and then did my PhD in environmental genomics from University of Washington. But I kind of had a fork in the path when I did this incubator program called the iCore, which is the U.S. government's startup incubator, basically,
Mm.
and realized something about myself that I really liked: faster pace of work, sooner impact than academia can have, and so then I kind of switched roles and went into working for startups. I've worked at several startups before in the biotech space, specifically in software for biotech. Worked at Dotmatics, Benchling. Both of them I would call bigger startups, but still sort of like pre-IPO. And yeah, now I'm at NVIDIA.
Awesome. Thanks for the overview. I'd love to go back to grad school for a moment because your degree piqued our interest. Would you mind sharing with us what exactly is environmental genomics?
Yeah, definitely a newer field, but at its core, it's using DNA to study the environment, right?
Mm.
Using sequencing technologies to study the environment. Usually the goal is to either find some useful novel metabolic activity or gene or enzyme that can help with various things. So like medicine, agriculture, bioremediation, even kind of understanding climate change effects on soil or water. There are a lot of applications of using sequencing in the environment. And then more specifically, one of the things that has become more popular is looking at uh, all the DNA without worrying about what species or what organism it comes from. And that's called metagenomics. So when I was an undergrad at Berkeley, I worked in this professor's lab, Dr. Jill Banfield, who pioneered the art of metagenomics in the environment. She was one of the first people to do it and publish on it. And so then when I went to grad school, I kind of brought that background with me. Yeah.
Gotcha, gotcha. Thanks for that. And your current role, of course, is at NVIDIA, which has become a household name at this point. What can you tell us so far about life, day-to-day life in the rocket ship?
Yeah, great question. So I had been following NVIDIA's work in life sciences for, I think, a year and a half before I even got there, just because it was kind of a big deal, right? When you see someone that's like a tech giant come into a field that's, that you've been studying, it's exciting. I And then I had also listened to like the podcast and interviews that Jensen had done where he talks about the culture of the company. And everything has been true so far, right? So the things that he has said is it's a very flat organization. They do, but like I think a lot of founders or a lot of CEOs often say that, but you wonder, like, is it? It's a very flat organization, and they pivot quite quickly if needed, right? They have that ability to, even though the company has about 30,000 employees right now, um, and they don't necessarily, they have this sort of like motto, like they don't lay off or fire people easily, right? They train you or they move you around to find your strengths.
Mhm.
And I've been there a little over 3 months now. I think from day one, the flat organization was obvious because even as a new employee, you're like sitting in um, like strategy meetings where high level execs are there. Obviously, you're not the one like chiming in because you're new, but you're sitting there. And then when I joined, we also had summer interns working at the company, and they're there too, right? And as I started to do more work, like we're writing a case study, the interns are like working with us in there, right? Like they're not just shadowing or watching you, they're learning from doing the work. They're learning from
Mm,
observing how execs make decisions. So I've heard a few people internally say it's like almost like doing an MBA
mm,
because you're learning how the business decisions are made in real time. And even Jensen, I mean, he gets involved directly sometimes. And I've already observed that happen with life sciences and with healthcare, right?
mm.
He will follow up on an email or, come to a meeting and want to learn more and really invest the time to learn more, right? So, yeah.
It's inspiring to hear Jensen coming into meetings and following up, in NVIDIA, in the life sciences sector. I'll switch gears and talk a bit more about your involvement with the bio AI community. I mean, I remember. Are you based in San Francisco? You are, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm in the Bay Area. I live
The
in
Bay
the East
Area.
Bay. I'm not in San Francisco. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yes. Yeah, I remember over the last 3 years building the company. I've been to many networking events, and I think I saw you in almost all of them. Maybe I shouldn't have been shy and said hi at some point before this interview. But you've been with Bits and Bio, the other code now. You're the PMM lead at NVIDIA. Um, I'm I'm curious what makes this community so important to you, Vega.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I think there's like a few ways to answer that. There's like a personal level and um, more of a kind of professional science answer. At at a personal level, I think I'm just really interested in seeing what new startups are doing. For a while, so I was before I joined NVIDIA, I was working like my other role outside of my main role was being a VC advisor. So I was often just looking to see what new companies are out there and what they're doing. Um, but it's also almost like a intellectual interest, right? Like I'm very interested in the science and I sometimes want to dive deeper into what founders are doing, which maybe sometimes my main role doesn't get into. So I like to seek it out. The other thing is that it's been a great place for me to make friends because if you're kind of really passionate about something, one of the easiest ways to make friends with people is find other people that are like you. And so that's where I met people that now I'm really good friends with. Last weekend I was at the beach with folks that I met from Bits and Bio in another community. And it doesn't feel like work because we can talk about science, we can talk about other things. So yeah, I really enjoyed for that reason. But even in my role, like as product marketing, community is super important, right? Like when you're launching a new product, community is essential because that's where you get your early feedback. That's where you can find the types of personas that will use the product. And that is very like technically a main part of product marketing. So when I was at Benchling, we like it was like my um recreation kind of met my job because I was able to connect the Bits and Bio community with Benchling and organize events. We did a product managers panel that was really, really successful. So yeah, I think there's like a personal motivation to go there and professional. And Bits and Bio has really grown. It's become amazing. Yeah.
Bits and Bio is huge. It's multinational, and I mean, from what I know, you know events, networking events, or events that you organize, or going to the beach is not the only way that you actually interact with this community, right? You actually write and publish articles as well. And one of the articles that I recently read was, unlearning bad habits from academia. I'm curious, what was the habit that was hardest to unlearn for you?
Oh yeah. So I look back at that article and I'm like, yeah, this title can be a little clickbaity. It's but like I think the way you do
Guilty as charged,
yeah, the way the way you do work in academia versus like a startup can be very different. Even if you are working on the same topic, I think you have to change how you approach work because like the amount of time you have and funding you have is very different. I think from that article, probably my favorite one is like rubber ducking, which is not a habit you unlearn, but sort of a habit you should learn. It's very much something I picked up from before I got into product. I was an application scientist, and this is at Dotmatics, where the job involved like a lot of coding actually, and the coding would have a problem solving aspect to it. Like often it was, how do we parse these assays and how do we do the analytics around it for this specific pharma company? And I would get stuck on like writing the code. And I realized that I was using my academic background, and there you're like this individual contributor and you often don't ask for help, right? Partly because you might be the only person doing that thing in the world. So who are you going to ask for help? You're at the edge of knowledge, right? But also it's not necessarily encouraged. Like the culture doesn't encourage seeking out assistance or admitting that you're stuck, right? So I really had to kind of unlearn that, and rubber ducking really helped because it's also called the Feynman technique. What it says is if you're stuck on something, explaining it out loud to another person actually helps you get unstuck. The act of, instead of just having it in your head versus saying it out loud, has different cognitive pathways. It helps you understand it better. It helps you get a new perspective. And if you don't have like a person to talk to about it, you should just talk to a rubber duck about it, and or something that's symbolic of a person, and it still helps. Just saying things out loud when you're stuck really helps for some reason. Yeah.
I often like to, when I talk about Superbuy or about anything really, I often like to find someone that is so far removed from what I'm doing and see if it makes any sense what I'm saying. Because unless you can actually like dilute it down to the essence of it, it's really difficult to communicate some concepts. And you know, I kind of find product management to be similar to that. You really need to go to the core of what a product is and then convey that in your messaging and your product and everything that's related to it. And you already mentioned, your work as as not a software scientist strictly, but your work with code and your work with bench and your work with in grad school and which is all these different disciplines that's necessary if you want to make it as a product manager in life sciences specifically. I wonder if you were to go back to your first days as being a product manager, what advice would you give to yourself?
Oh wow. I think a lot of product management challenges they can be technical, but the really big ones are usually like people. They're about finding common ground with multiple people or multiple groups of people that don't necessarily have the same viewpoint, right? That happens a lot. Like when you're a PM at a company, you'll get, and product marketing as well, actually, like you'll get feedback or opinions from a few different sources, and you have to sort of be the filter for that advice. Like you take it all in, but at the end you act on something based on your knowledge and all the feedback you got. um, for me, like the hard part was understanding that as a product manager, you really don't have any vertical influence, right? Like you can never just tell people to do something. Like you run the scrum and the sprint ceremonies for the engineers, but you're not really like their boss at all. You're not you so ideally, if you really want them to be present and be active participants, you have to share your vision with them, and you have to kind of get people on your side. You have to have sort of lateral influence, and that is it's hard to do, but it's a much better way to do it versus telling people what to do. Yeah.
So it's about communicating that vision frequently and aligning everyone, and also adjusting your vision as you go along as well, right?
Absolutely. I think telling that vision to them, but telling them in terms of what they care about, right? Like acknowledging that why would engineers work in life sciences? And so putting it in the perspective for them to know what impact they're having and then yeah, actually being flexible enough to know that in the future, if you have new information, we need to adjust the vision. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I think us as a field, we've done a tremendous job recruiting amazing engineers to the field and getting convincing someone with no life sciences background to work on life sciences problems. But I think more people come and more they realize that they're like, you know, there are significant gaps in our understanding or capability in AI and life sciences. I'm curious, in your opinion, what is the most significant gap in our current understanding for AI and life sciences?
Yeah. I think I guess not understanding necessarily, but the lack of certain tools that might enable us better. I think one, it's data, right? Like, I think the way we've collected data, both public and proprietary, is uh, not standardized and kind of messy and often lacking key pieces of information. So that's definitely been a gap in effectively using predictive modeling, right? Especially when you compare it to maybe some other fields where there is long periods of times where data was collected in a very systematic way. I think a good example is like weather prediction. So much more standardized formats, so you can apply certain predictive models much easier than you could to say like biological data where say you're studying a cell or you're collecting proteins. So that's I think a big gap, and maybe companies like Benchling and Dotmatics are solving that, or at least like hoping to solve that by being the first entry point for the data and helping get data organized. Um, I think another layer of it, I wouldn't call it a gap, but like a thing that I'm hoping will become bigger is the use of more generalized LLMs for just like productivity and faster work within life sciences. So right now we're very hyper focused on like protein interactions, predictive modeling for that, and how proteins and ligands bind and things like that. But I wonder who's working on like how to incorporate ChatGPT. I mean, I know people are, but I want to see it at a larger scale, like how to integrate Llama 3 into like life sciences and things like that. Yeah.
Um, while we have you here, Vega, I'd love to ask some more forward-looking questions as well. So maybe through that lens of what the current limitations are in bio AI, what sort of key inflection points do you see at the intersection of these fields that most excite you in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah. I think in the world of drug discovery, a lot of like benchmarks or inflection points have been actually from the regulatory side.
Hmm.
So when the COVID mRNA vaccine was approved, that was a landmark thing because it was one of the fastest FDA approvals in the history of drugs, right? So I think in the world of drug discovery, that inflection point will actually be like an FDA approval for a drug candidate that was like either discovered or there was a lot of work done using computer aided discovery, right? I don't think we'll ever get away from lab work. Like we will always have to do experimentation, but I think we don't yet have that like candidate that we can hold up and be like, this was discovered or, went through like screening using computer aided discovery. So that to me will be a landmark event. Um, I I think 10 years down the line, my hope is like cautiously optimistic, is that we don't even like talk about computer aided drug discovery and drug discovery as separate things. They just become a
Hmm.
natural tool that everyone uses and it's totally obvious, and there's no discussion on whether or not you should use it. It should be in your arsenal of all of the other tools that we use, like sequencing or flow cytometry, right? Yeah.
It'll be plan A. Yeah, interesting. I wonder if there's any obscure or relatively unknown corner of the biotech industry that excites you because it might become a bigger deal in the future.
Oh, yes. Oh my gosh. I'm so glad you asked. I get really interested in like the sort of field of gut microbiome research.
Hmm.
And I wouldn't even call it like a small thing because there was a time when there was a boom of companies that came out of, various papers, but we still don't fully understand like what the gut microbiome how our lifestyle or diet impacts it and what we can do to modulate it. But we know it's important, and I'm hoping for like an interesting company that can do both tracking of gut microbiome and it's directly related to sequencing getting cheaper. So DNA sequencing keeps getting cheaper, which means we can have all these other technologies or services available to us. I'm looking forward to a company that does it well, where they are able to track human gut microbiome and make predictions for your health. And I think it's associated with longevity as well, in a useful way, where an average person can take real interventions, like either take supplements or change their diet and see an effect, right? So
Super, super cool. Agree. It's a really interesting area. I guess just to ask a quick follow-up based on your background in environmental genomics, what type of data do you think we'll need to really understand the gut microbiome? Does it have to be like shotgun metagenomics, or what's your expert opinion?
I think that's, first of all, such a good question. I think it will have to be beyond DNA because
Mm,
DNA is our blueprint. It can only tell us what is possible, not what's actually happening, right? So if
mm,
I sequence the DNA of my entire gut microbiome, it's going to tell me what potential my gut microbiome has, not what it's actually doing. Is it producing those enzymes? I don't know. I just know I have bacteria that have the genes to do it.
mhm,
Are those genes switched on enough? I don't know, right? So truly, I think proteomics, like the ability to see if certain proteins are there, present, is going to be way more important than genomics. And so I'm
mhm.
really excited about companies that are working on like making just sequencing proteomes like cheaper, better, faster. I think that will be the key.
Sure, sure. Thanks for that. So I wonder, looking back on your journey, we've heard about like incredible diversity in your background, right? Environmental genomics, software companies, now moving into AI, right? What advice would you give to aspiring researchers hoping to make waves in this emergent AI and biospace?
Yeah. I think for me, the biggest sort of switch that happened is I just stopped being afraid of like looking stupid and started talking about it, what I was interested in, and started writing about it. And it 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 works in a wonderful way where when you put your ideas out, people sort of want to talk about it, and then how you understand it is over time refined. So I think like I had this definitely like as an academic, this like perfectionist dilemma of like making sure, nature paper quality of work should go out and nothing else. I think
Mm,
I've moved away from that where I feel like if there's a hackathon, go to it and don't worry about what your title or what your role is. If it interests you, just do it. Um, yeah, I feel like for most people, like my title doesn't invoke like a technical background necessarily, but if that interests me, I'll still go to it and I'll still try to participate in it. And I think that's been very beneficial for me. Yeah.
very cool.
You do have the startup fire still burning in you, Meg. I can tell.
It'll never go away. I think
It will
like
never go away now.
I think Nvidia is just a big startup to me. Like
It's,
yeah. Yeah.
I mean, especially the life sciences part, right? It's a relatively new focus, but there's a lot of attention and resources and rightfully a lot of big accomplishments going into it. And let's test your theory. We have this final signature question, as we call it, and it is the year is 2222. I wonder how you envision, what you envision AI did to our lives. Are we living forever, or is it more of a 1984-esque world?
That's a good question. I'm a very much like a techno optimist. So I always think new technology will make human lives better. And even looking at human history, for the most part, barring a few exceptions, human lives have improved because of things we've discovered, things we've made, right? I believe the same for AI. I think I see AI as like what Google did maybe like a couple decades ago, where knowledge was democratized. There was globalization, people could find information quickly. I think a lot of the more generalized AI tools we see are just doing that, but just at another scale, right? I think it's going to improve education. It's going to definitely make us more global. People are going to ingest information faster, learn new skills faster. All of those are very exciting to me. I think in the future, we're not going to see it as a differentiated thing. AI is just going to be within all the tools we use. It'll be a natural extension of our digital life, as I think of it. Yeah. The longevity question, are we going to live longer? I think a lot of dots to connect there between AI tools and longevity, but I do trust that the goal shouldn't be to live longer, but to live good for as long as possible, right? To have mobility, to have better health. And I think a lot of companies are working on that. And I hope they use all the AI tools available. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not what was the term? Not the lifespan, but the health span
Exactly.
is looking to be extended, right? Okay. I totally agree with your techno optimism when it comes to AI. I think my biggest fear is that would it increase the existing gap between certain areas, certain countries, certain geographies, between those who can invest a lot of time, effort into the security of these tools versus those who cannot or who doesn't for any reason. I suspect that might cause increase in gap in a variety of different things between different countries, which led me to ask this question to everyone we talked with, right? But it's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you, Vega. I guess our last question is, what's next for you?
For now, NVIDIA, trying to become good at what I do. And the other sort of part of my role at NVIDIA, I'm product marketing lead, but I've also started getting involved with NVIDIA Ventures, which is the venture capital arm, partly because they're interested in life sciences companies, and I can provide some perspective there. So really excited about that aspect of my role. Yeah, it's an exciting time.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for joining Super Bioscientist Spotlight. I'll be sure to say hi to you the next time I see you at an event. And yeah, thanks for joining.
Thank you so much, both of you. It was great talking to you.
Thanks, Vega. It was fun.
All right.